So we're going to be talking about the books, but we're going to be talking about a lot more and just trying to keep it fun and casual.
When you write a story, you have to understand that there will be people who will hate it, there will be people who love it, but you cannot let that affect you. Because if you let that affect you, then your story suffers. I think in editing, a lot of stuff does get cut out. I remember that there were some scenes that were a bit more gruesome,
Yeah.
and the publisher was like, this is too much.
Right.
This could be a bit too much for reader sensibility, so you have to understand that as well.
And Alan, it's your first time out to this part of the world.
It is very exciting to be here.
Yes.
Being Irish, I'm kind of melting in the heat.
And I have got Ireland on my wish list. Looking at it from a distance, there's a lot of envy.
Absolutely, yeah, especially for Pakistan.
Yes, that's right. Especially when I'm in like 45 degrees here, I'm like, my writing can't match up to that. Okay, well, Awais, Alan, welcome to the UAE. Such a pleasure to have both of you. I'm not a big fan of very long introductions, so I want to get right in. But Awais is the author of two highly internationally acclaimed novels, No Honor and In the Company of Strangers. And Alan is the author of several novels, including the one that I must mention, which is The Kindness of Psychopaths. And so we're going to be talking about the books, but we're going to be talking about a lot more and just trying to keep it fun and casual. So we're going to get right in. Welcome.
Thank you so much. It's really nice to be here in Abu Dhabi.
Yes.
It's quite an experience. The first time I'm visiting since 2009.
Really? To
Yeah.
Abu Dhabi or to the UAE in
to Abu
general?
Dhabi.
Right,
Yeah.
right. And do you feel like it's changed or you can't say yet?
Yeah, no, it's changed. It's definitely changed. Yeah.
Yeah. And Alan, it's your first time out to this part of the world.
It is very exciting to be here.
Yes.
Being Irish, I'm kind of melting in the heat.
Of course, yeah.
Quite a nice change from at home where it's cold and rainy.
Yeah, and you guys had a great time at the Sharjah Book Fair.
Absolutely. It's been wonderful.
It's been really exciting. It's quite a flagship event. Yeah, okay, well, I mean, so much to talk about in such little time, but we're gonna get right in. Awais, I guess what I want to start with you, and I want to talk about, a lot of your work deals with, amongst a lot of other things, deals with women, gender, and let me say even beyond gender, like your female characters are really front and center, and there's a lot of meat on the bone there, right? And I guess I want to start with saying we're in a time where feminism and talk around that is so charged up, that anything one puts out, you wonder how people are going to react to it. You're thinking, oh my gosh, like, could anyone object to this in any particular way? And the question I have is, when you're writing or sort of crafting characters of the so-called opposite sex, what's on your mind? And I mean like the whole spectrum. So right from the best parts of it to like the fears and the anxiety. What is sort of the litmus test to say, I think that feels authentic, if there is such a thing? Should we start there?
Well, I think that we're actually a writer is a storyteller. So the first thing that you need to consider is that you're writing a story. And when you write a story, you have to understand that there will be people who will hate it, there will be people who love it, but you cannot let that affect you. Because if you let that affect you, then your story suffers, and
Yes.
the characters suffer, and everything suffers in the end. So I think that when I'm writing a female character, I rely predominantly on observation, because obviously observation is key to any writer. But apart from that, I think as a male writer, I feel that we could use whatever influence we have to make things better for women in Pakistan. So that's what I try to do with my writing. And I feel that a character just comes to me, and then it's the story that defines it, reveals it. So I come up with a character, yes, it's in my head, but it's the events in the story that sort of unveil it, and that's what that's the trajectory my writing takes. So yeah.
I love that. I find that so fascinating because, I mean, you know this, Awais, but a lot of like my own work is about kind of how do we talk about coalition versus like, you know, like an us versus them kind of gender conversation. And I think it's just so poignant that you said you want to use that sort of power as a storyteller or the power of words to really, and as a man to do that. You know, I find that so refreshing. And then, you know, I don't even know where to start because there's so much. I mean, I guess let's begin with the genre. And as I was thinking about these questions, I'm like, he probably gets this so much and it's probably done to death. But, you know, writing in the thriller genre, you know, and not once, but multiple times, there's this sense of you've got to keep people at the edge of your seat. You've got to like, it's got to be compelling throughout in a sense. And I think my closest experience with it was Skyfall started out as anything but a thriller. And then later when I had people saying, oh yeah, like in the blurb saying this, I'm thinking, oh my goodness, you know, yeah. But of course, in ways that was very different from your kind of writing. And I guess I'm really interested to ask you, what's in the toolbox? Like, what does it take to, we all get asked this, but like, oh, what is the muse? What is the research? What are the tools that allow you to kind of keep people coming back for more, in a sense?
Yeah. I think there are so many tools. I think particularly for thrillers, it's like you say, it's quite demanding in terms of constantly controlling the reader in a nice way. You have to control their mind, kind of. So I think if I come up with a scenario that interests me, then I will kind of take it from there. And the pacing is obviously extremely important.
Yeah.
So that is something I work on a lot. And that's why one thing I do is write short chapters. And I think it's much, you see a lot of literary books might have few chapters or no chapters, even 2 or 3. But I think every few 5 or 6 pages in my books you'll come to a new chapter.
Yeah.
That's when you need to hit the reader with a nice cliffhanger to make them want to keep reading.
Sure.
And often I'll go to a different character in the next chapter. So this multiple perspectives thing is good for so many reasons.
Yeah.
In a thriller. And exploring different characters, but also cliffhangers, moving on to a different scenario, cutting between different plot lines.
Yeah.
There's so many things involved.
Yes, and I hear you on pacing because, I mean, even though my own work was not a thriller, I felt like the chapters where the story was kind of becoming more suspense-stricken are much shorter, and so I find that so interesting that would definitely help with trying to keep people gripped.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Awais, I have a really fun sort of, it's not a very serious question, but I'm curious to ask you how you select the names of your characters.
Names of my characters?
Yeah, like how does that happen?
Because you see, in Pakistan, there are some names that are very much in fashion these days, some that are a little old-fashioned.
Yeah.
So you have to be very careful about selecting names. So whenever I'm writing about rural Pakistan, so I go for the old-fashioned names because they're pretty much in vogue.
Yes.
Rural Pakistan, but in urban Pakistan, names like Aisha, Sana, and they're more popular. So that's what I usually come up with.
Yeah.
So so it's a very it's actually a very conscious decision coming up with names because names can really make or break your character.
I so hear you. I totally hear you. And is there do you at all look at the meaning, or is it more like just, would it be like modern or traditional, sound of it?
I don't really look at the meaning, but only how the name sounds like in that particular setting and whether it applies. Because you can't have a Mona in a rural Pakistan.
That's right. That would be a bit odd.
Yeah, that would be very odd. So it has to be something that's related to that area and that time period.
Yeah. I find that so interesting because I feel that's so true. One may not realize it's it's a little subconscious, but a name, you're so right, really has to fit in quite lyrically, and it doesn't seem like that would be the case, but it's amazing how much energy and time gets invested in making sure, does Mona belong to this world or not, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's a very conscious decision, absolutely.
Yeah, and if I have a question, I liked that. But when let's talk about No Honor, what got edited out of the book? Either by you or either by what I mean to say is like, are there things that haven't made it to the book, or was there a thought process around that?
Well, I think with editing, a lot of stuff does get cut out. I remember that there were some scenes that were a bit more gruesome,
Yeah.
and the publisher was like, this is too much.
Right.
This could be a bit too much for reader sensibility, so you have to understand that as well. That it's yes, we have to show that this is going on and the gruesome activity has taken place, but we also have to respect the reader's sensibilities and make sure that we shock them, but don't really
Yes.
shock them that they sort of lose it entirely.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
those kind of things, I think a little, and I think a few subplots here and there, maybe
Yes.
subplots, as you know, I mean, the writer, we as writers love them because
Yes.
they say that it reveals a lot about the minor characters and how they relate to the main character. But the readers don't really love them that
That's
much.
right.
So.
They just want to get to like the heart of the story.
And flashbacks.
Yes,
and
yes.
Which we love to, I guess that gives us a little insight into the main character that people, readers don't really like.
Yeah. No, absolutely. Yeah. I guess I'm going to throw this out to either of you, but a journalist asked me the other day to write a piece on writer's block. I haven't actually done it yet. And I don't know if I will, but I want to ask you, like, is writer's block real? Do you think it's a thing? Because there's such polemic reactions to this, right? It's like completely mythical. There's nothing like that. Get down and write like 6,000 words a day. Or is it? And I'm not. The funny thing is, I'm not sure where I stand on it. But do you have thoughts?
Yeah, my own thoughts are not that there's writer's block, but you can be blocked on a particular story or a particular novel. That definitely happens. Sometimes you need time to think about it. Like I spent a year and a half writing the kind of psychopaths, and on and off. So I wasn't writing all that time, but I knew I had it almost finished, and I felt it wasn't quite there, wasn't right.
Yeah.
And I went away for a few months and came back and finished it, and it just kind of clicked. So I think sometimes you need to let your unconscious mind mull it over, and you can work on other things while you're doing that. Maybe work on another project while you're taking a break from your main book.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like project block.
Yeah. I feel that a lot as well, and it's something I've recently come to where I realized instead of trying to put myself to a number of words a day, which I think that discipline sort of has to be there, but I'm so with you to say every day can't be an amazing writing day, and that's okay. And I do think going to some other things and then coming back makes a difference.
Really focusing on enjoying writing, I think, makes such a difference.
Yes.
You can be working on something that's not much fun, and the writing probably won't be great.
Yes.
Just go and play with something you enjoy. Play with the story you're having fun with.
Yeah. I also feel changing physical environments really makes a difference for me. So I remember with Skyfall, we were in Australia for a little bit, and I just thought, I'm never going to touch the laptop while I'm there, just because it was like supposed to be a break. And you realize, also living in the UAE, you realize how much you miss nature, which I feel like if someone asks me, that's like a huge muse, Awais, you're lucky. Like Lahore is like, I don't know, even though living there, I suppose it's very everyday.
Yeah.
But I remember, because a large part of my book is based in Lahore, I just feel like every little nook and cranny, and again, I'm exoticizing it a little bit, but it feels like it exudes some kind of character, or some kind of color.
Lahore definitely has character and also has such a vast history attached to it, and that is so important when you're writing about a city, when you're setting your novel in a city. I think it's very important to sort of integrate that into your book. So, and I feel quite at home when I'm writing about it.
Yeah.
For obvious reasons, because I was brought up there.
Yeah.
But I do feel like you said that when you were in Australia and you started getting this inspiration to write, I felt the same when I was in London.
Yeah.
And I thought that I'd get no writing done.
Yes.
Your schedule in London is so haphazard, it's busy,
so
and
hectic,
the commute and everything. So you're like, when will I even find time to write?
Yeah.
But I would go to that Brussels Square Starbucks and write every day, and it went really well for me.
That's amazing.
The change of setting really helps sometimes.
That's it. That's what I feel. And guys, I also feel like this thing you were saying about kind of being in Lahore. And places, whether it's Lahore or London or whatever, but the place you're kind of living in, or maybe not necessarily even living in, because I wasn't living in Lahore when I wrote about it, but this idea of place as protagonist and place as character. And I realized it in the editing stage where my editor was like, you're going to be speaking to people who potentially can't even place Lahore on a map. And that's fine. But then without sort of being voyeuristic, you need to really make it immersive for people, and I'm so with you on that you have to weave like the fabric of the place and the city and the sounds, and Lahore offers that and so much more. But total aside, Alan, I have got Ireland on my wish list because a friend of mine went and I vicariously saw those pictures and just felt like, oh my goodness, I can't believe I've lived in England and haven't visited. Like, it's crazy.
You'll have to come. Where did your friend go?
So, Dublin.
Dublin? Okay.
Yes.
Oh, yes. You'll have to go and see it.
Oh, absolutely. I would love that. And it's interesting because when you're at a distance, I feel like, oh, people living in like the UK or whatever like this, you feel like, oh, they'd be inspired all the time. But I suppose that also becomes everyday in a strange way.
I suppose.
But looking at it from a distance, there's a lot of envy.
Absolutely, yeah, especially for Pakistan.
Yes, that's right. Especially when I'm in like 45 degrees here, I'm like, my writing can't match up to that. Yes, I want to spend a little bit of time talking about, we were talking about this before we started recording, but just promotions, marketing, it's become such a big thing, And I know as I use those words, they sound loaded because it sounds like I'm saying it in a kind of deprecating way of like, oh gosh, like we have to self-promote, we have to market. And let me lead with saying that I've had a very schizophrenic relationship with it myself, whereas I was telling you, when I started out, Bloomsbury was like, you're going to have to shamelessly market yourself. And when I heard those words, like a part of me just died. I was like, oh my goodness, no, Yet for better or for worse, I feel like I've come to this, or I've put myself on this journey where I'm growing to be less intimidated or less sort of judgmental about social media or about marketing, and just feeling like, I can use it as a vehicle to express. And I don't always have to feel like, oh my gosh, how many likes were there? Of course those things matter, and I'm not going to pretend like they don't. But it can be used beyond that as well. Instagram was something that used to make me very jittery. I used to feel like I'm past my sell-by date with Instagram. I don't get it. But yet I feel like there are things that you can use it for creatively. I'll give you an example, like every year I'm not going to be writing a book, or a book is not going to be coming out. So I feel like I can use that just for like the smaller creative nuggets, be that a verse, be that a quote, be that just, I don't know, even visual storytelling. Talk to me about your relationship with marketing and promotions and social media and the digital kind of avatar.
Who knows me a little bit will know that I'm very active on social media.
Yes, and you're amazing.
Thank you for that, but that wasn't always the case. So
Right.
I was a very private person, and I used to be very afraid of being in the public eye. But it all changed when I think when I signed up with an agent, she was like, you have to start putting yourself out there because it's very important to build a profile for yourself and it's a brand. And you're right that social media can be used for things beyond your marketing and stuff, and it's also to build a sense of identity. So a lot of people relate to me because of social media, because of Twitter or Instagram, and I've made so many nice friends through that as well. So that's what it can be used for as well. It's not just your promotion, but the fact that you find like-minded people there. Yes, you will find the occasional reader there who will tag you in a very bad way.
I know, and I'm like, did you really need to do that?
So you'll always get that, but you have to sort of rise beyond it. And I wouldn't pretend, like you said, that you watch likes and stuff. You can't really pretend. Similarly, you can't pretend that reviews don't affect you.
Of course.
They do affect you, but you have to sort of go beyond it and just look at the greater picture that there are people who appreciate you as well, and that's also very good for a writer's motivation as well. And there are other people out there who are waiting to read your work, who appreciate your work, who appreciate you as a person. So all of that contributes to a writer's sense of being, sense of well-being, because writing at the end of the day is such a solitary activity. So you need that tribe, you need that appreciation to keep going. So that's my relationship with social media.
Yeah, and I love it because, we've spoken about this in earlier talks that we've done together, but this idea of just some kind of community. And
Oh yeah.
I have to say, and you know, Wes, you kind of trailblazed this area when none of us were even, I'm talking about the Pakistani space where it was a few canonical kind of names. And then I was literally saying this to Amber yesterday, and that's amazing to me because when I first kind of ventured in, and Wes was one of the first people that I got to know kind of through the online space, when I asked you to blur Skyfall, and I feel like you're right. I think that's the good, the bad, the ugly, like with any other space, but it has definitely offered avenues for allyship and for solidarity and just feeling like even this thing you're saying about reviews or just reactions, the fact that you're saying that out loud makes me feel like it's not just Alan or me, or like, you know, you realize that everybody goes through that, you know, and yes, you're right, it doesn't feel great, but the thing that makes me really, it's been poignant for me is like, I remember in an interview somebody once asked me like, what has been like one of the best reactions you've had to Skyfall? And you know, Wes, it was literally somebody messaging me directly on Instagram, a girl from Hyderabad, saying, you know, I'm on the bus back home and I've just reached this part in Skyfall where this tragedy occurs and I'm just so glad I have a mask on because I can't stop crying. And I just felt like, you know, that's not like an amazing review in like the New York Times or whatever, but I just felt like I don't know who you are, but I connect with you, and that just feels so beautifully textured. So I'm totally with you that I think coming to that, although I have to say, you know, Wes, it's been a journey for me because and probably for you as well, like you were saying, I don't think we started out feeling like completely comfortable with this persona or whatever it might be, and then you realize there are ways you can use it, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah, but I have to say, like, you are doing an amazing job.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, without it ever being loud or kind of screaming from a rooftop, but just feeling like really tastefully done.
I mean, I try to be myself, and the most important thing I feel is that in addition to promoting your own work, it's so important to promote other people as well, other writers, which is what you do. I mean, from your Instagram or your Facebook, you'll see that out of 10, maybe 1 or 2 posts are about Skyfall, the rest are about you promoting other people and other books and other writers, which is how it should be, I think. So that is why people also relate to you. And maybe to some extent they might relate to me because they're like, you know, this guy will also promote other people.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's not just a me, myself, and I kind of. Yeah.
You can't have that because then people get bored.
And you're right, they do, and you know, there's this thing you're saying about keeping it a little bit real, which I know is not always easy, but you're a great example of that. No, you really are, and I feel like I don't want to kind of, you know, but it's not easy to do that when you have 2 really, really acclaimed books out, and I think we'll talk about this a little bit later, but I think it's something that I definitely always look to learn from, you know. Alan, you know, we're going to wrap, but I have a last question, which is, we think about, I remember I was once interviewing, you know, this Pakistani writer Mohsin Hamid for a podcast, and he said something about, you know, kind of, I was asking about, a lot of people feel like the novel, who reads? Like, and I have to be honest and say I had that fear before writing, or at least kind of just the stereotype in my head of like the novel is extinct. People now watch, people now will read a speeding op-ed. Like, who's going to pick up a whole book and read 300 pages? I guess my question is there, when you think about the literature that you've consumed or that you consume, is there something that has made you think differently about the power of fiction and that has made you think differently about the power of, I say fictional storytelling because I think other kind of, you know, kind of non-fiction stuff, yes, has its own place, but if I talk about fiction, I mean, let me say for me, that would probably be the literature that I read in Urdu, which I just felt was really, I hate using this phrase, but it was really ahead of its time, you know, in coming from the subcontinent. And it felt like we talk about women, we talk about gender today, and then there were people like Manto and Ismat Jutai writing about that ages ago, like Faiz's poetry. And I'm like, this is not new to Pakistan or to the subcontinent, but is there something like that for you that kind of was a bit of a watershed?
I think just the fact that novel is so different. It's more that it's a different experience for me than watching a TV show or a movie or any other kind of media. I think it's the most immersive art form that can take you into the character's mind
Yeah.
Movies do a great job of, they have tools that we don't have, like music and
That's correct.
visual imagery and other sounds and things, but they can't get inside the character's head. There's no other art form that can do that. So I think one thing that does is that it allows you to increase empathy, and as a reader, I think you put yourself in other people's shoes, people from different parts of the world and different positions, different social strata, and it really lets you live their lives for a while, and then you get a better understanding of other people, hopefully a better acceptance of others. So I think that's really both, it's enjoyable and it's important.
Yes.
Both
Yes.
things. Yeah, so that is why I love books, and I'm not worried about dying.
Yeah. Yes. Yes. I love what you said about being in like someone's head, right? Because,
Yeah.
and I used to think about this a lot. I was like, making a film, obviously you do have a different toolbox and you feel like, yeah, I can just go shoot it out. But I'm so with you that I think the power of words on a page and then your imagination is pretty infinite and it's incomparable in many ways. Well, this has been so fantastic, Awais and Alan, and thank you so much for coming out to Abu Dhabi. This means so much to me. And just as Awais was saying, just the fact that we are able to have community and genuine allyship and in a space that often feels quite insecure. This is very, very meaningful to me. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having us, and it's especially more important today and more special today because it's happening after the year that we have had. So it means even more. So to have a face-to-face interaction with someone, so it means a lot. And thank you so much for that.
No, absolutely. And Alan, it's such a pleasure that we finally met. And
Absolutely. It's a total pleasure to be here and meet you.
oh no, thank you so much. Thank you.